Alright, I'm back with another Destiny 2 video ahead of tomorrow, which I think is going to be the last relic that we have to get, at least judging by the shelf space that we have in the helm, so there will be some things to discuss there. I wanted to talk about champions today, because that came up over the weekend. I was just running some master GLASSWAYs to see if I could get an okay DFA and just some materials. I had nothing really else to do. And I once again have found myself in that final room where they're just constantly spawning champions. I think there are 12 champions in the final room that spawn in different waves. And I tweeted, why are there so many champions in the GLASSWAY? It's too many champions. And then that led DMG to reply with, get good. And then that whole exchange went viral over the course of the last 48 hours to the point where DMG had to clarify, actually, we always love feedback and we're taking feedback on difficulty and champions and et cetera, et cetera. And, I think a lot of people were seeing that and be like, I can't believe this is Bungie's philosophy. And, Bungie would say that. And, and then other people are just enjoying me being roasted. It's funny because that took on a life of its own because, I know DMG. We're, internet friends. So he was just trying to ratio me, which to be funny. And it was funny. It was very funny. But he's not, I don't think he's dismissing concerns about champions. That was just a joke. He's allowed to make jokes. But it did kind of spark a debate about champions and, difficulty and all this stuff. For me, my original tweet, I actually didn't write that because it's oh, that room is so hard and I hate it and I wish there were less champions because I'm struggling with it so much. If I wanted to really complain about difficulty in the GLASSWAY, the hardest part of that whole room is probably the wyverns, which are not champions. They just creep around completely silently, will dive bomb you, will shoot you with double damage void things, have a bazillion HP, and you can't stun them because they're not champions. So someone was saying what if they were unstoppable wyverns? That would be horrific. It's no, actually that'd be easier because you could stun them and then kill them. And then all the anti-champion mods and stuff would work on them in a way where that is not true with wyverns. My good friend Wishender was doing a lot of work on the wyverns because not only does it do chonky damage to red bars, it also has that Sightons bug that I wrote about where you do 60% more damage shooting through Sightons. So that was actually very fun to kill wyverns with. I think my point still stands about the champions. There's too many champions. There's such a thing as too many champions. And for me, that was not really, it's not a difficulty thing. It's about the pacing because it just, the whole rest of the strike compared to that boss room is just the pacing does not work. And spawning that many champions in addition to the other enemies like wyverns, and the wyverns might as well be champions, if not harder than champions, plus the two bosses roaming around, it just makes that area a total slog. And it's not really usually the champions that are going to kill you. The Minotaurs will come in and screw with you, but just going outside to kill 4 anti-barrier hobgoblins is just very annoying. And I'm doing this for loot. I'm not doing this in this case I wasn't doing this for a GM clear. You need to kill all the champions to make sure you get platinum in order to have the best chance at the best loot, which is kind of another irritating factor. And for me, that is just too many champions. There's 29 champions, 27 champions in that strike, and the next closest one is 19 champions or something in all the Nightfalls this cycle. This kind of brought up more debates about the larger issues with champions, how we're feeling about them in this day and age, what can be done to help fix that. I talked about this a long time ago, back when Witch Queen launched, about when I think Destiny difficulty is at its best, and I think there are 2 clear places you can point to in order that I would consider Destiny at its best difficulty. Legendary Witch Queen campaign, a very, very good balance of difficult content, but not relying on champions to make it difficult, which allows you to have a very diverse type of loadout. And I remember everyone was talking about their builds for their first run of Legendary there, and that was no one had the same build twice. Essentially, it was people doing a lot of diverse things. The other thing is contest mode day 1 raids, which again do not have champions. The difficulty there, like Legendary Campaign, is because of a set power gap that you cannot close. And I guess this is a larger question about power level as well. But again, there's no champions to consider. Raids may have a little bit less freedom with your loadout because you need, X or Y DPS or mob clearing option depending on the segment. However, I still think that is, what most people consider a fun kind of difficulty in Destiny. And once you get to champions, I don't know. It's a little less so. I think my favorite champion-based activity is probably soloing Lost Sectors. I actually really enjoy soloing Lost Sectors. The problem with that is not the champions, and I think the champions actually pose the right kind of difficulty there and level of difficulty. It's that the rewards for doing that are just total crap. So I do that I'll do that until I get the new exotic to drop per season, but trying to farm that for an actual targeted exotic for a specific thing you're going for is freaking impossible because you can go 10, 15, 20 rounds without even a single exotic dropping. And so the rates on that are bonkers bad. Nightfalls, it's a range. I think my favorite instance of a Nightfall in terms of difficulty balance was match-made legend difficulty Nightfalls. The very, very brief window. Was that Guardian Games? I forget when it was. I think it was Guardian Games where we had the ability to blindly matchmake for what was essentially a legend level Nightfall. So it had champions. You still had to have something of a loadout, but there were no locked loadouts, I don't think. But it was still difficult enough to be somewhat challenging. I have never been a fan of GMs, and you can bring up my GM report and see how few GMs I run. I have not run very many GMs because I don't care. I don't like them. They're boring. They're slogs. They are just exhausting. And the concept of just channeling the most amount of possible survivability you can. So just burying yourself in wells and bubbles and Titan shields and things like that. And then combined with just incessantly team shotting just hordes and hordes of champions and just coordinating that so you just burst each one down and then just throwing just dozens of them at you. I don't find that engaging. That is not to me a fun range of difficulty compared to the stuff that I have mentioned before, like the day one rating or for in my case Legends campaigns. And I'm really looking forward to the Legend Lightfall campaign because of that. I get that it's hard, and if that is the kind of difficulty you like, that's fine. But I think that being the end all be all and the primary place where you farm shards and things like that, and the only place you can get adept weapons, even though adept weapons are kind of crap now. I've never really liked that as the top level of difficulty, even if it is the hardest thing you can do, but it is not content that I think is interesting to engage with. And it really bothers me that every metric is measured to, how well can this build, can this weapon perform in a GM, because the GMs are a special sort of activity with just so little survivability and so many tanky enemies thrown at you that it's just a totally different game. And I agree with kind of the common complaints about champions affecting build diversity, and I thought we were making some pretty good strides in that direction, in that I think Bungie did a good job offering, over the past few months, and especially this past patch, they've been adding more and more and more intrinsic anti-champion abilities to exotics. So I don't know if the other idea is viable of just you should have access to all champion mods on all gear at any given time, and there should never be any sort of rotation within the seasonal artifact. I just don't know if that's viable, or I feel like if you do that, then that negates kind of the entire purpose of champions to begin with. It's just you're permanently taking up arm slots to be whatever the anti-champion thing is on whatever build. I'm okay with being this is a season more focused on fusion rifles or whatever, or a season more focused on glaives. I'm okay with that fundamentally, but I think the good middle ground there was the ability to have a wider array of exotics, and exotics that you may not necessarily have used otherwise, being given access to more anti-champion mods. And this season in particular, I have really genuinely enjoyed using Wishender as a new anti-barrier weapon. I think it is very strong. I think it is a fun alternative to Arbalest, which everyone, once they made Arbalest anti-barrier, that was pretty much all anyone would use. And I think the solution here is to keep doing more of this and creating more and more exotics with anti-champion capabilities. And I was disappointed to see that Bungie just said that they're not actually planning to add any more anti-champion abilities to existing exotics, even as they are they're touching, quote unquote, 26 different exotics next patch, and none of that involves actually adding any anti-champion functionality. I think one new exotic will have it at baseline next season, but they're not adding anything else. And to me, it just really does not feel great when... This is the problem with the artifact, is like, we keep running into situations where it's like, oh, I got this cool new weapon that I like, I got this new sidearm I really like from this, activity, but this is a season where there are no champion sidearm mods, so you will literally only be using that in low-level content that does not have any champions, or unless you go way back and do something like, legend campaign runs or something. But to me, that really hurts diversity in a way that it's above and beyond what Match Game ever was. Like, Match Game already is kind of a build diversity hurting option, and then you stack that with champions, and so you have something like, okay, here's GLASSWAY, where you need something to get through the solar shank shields everywhere, so you have to have some sort of solar component, but then you also need, things that are going to be able to stun overloads and anti-barriers and, kill the boss and burst the boss down in something approaching a reasonable time frame. So like it jams you into these very, very restrictive loadouts, and it doesn't really necessarily become about your gameplay, but about being herded into kind of very specific builds that, there's a reason that Arbalest is, best in slot for almost everything in a lot of these situations, because if you're doing anything besides that, for the most part, it's inefficient and you're, not doing it correctly. So I think things have gotten a little better also with Subclass 3.0. I think there are some interesting things that brought to the table where it's not necessarily anti-champion, but like we have gotten some things like, okay, Titan Storm Great Grenade builds are really strong now. You can put an anti-overload mod on that. You can put Bad Amplitude, I think that's what it is. It jolts champions when you hit them with an arc ability. So those two things combined to make Arc 3.0, especially on Titans, like really good for champion activity. So like the 3.0 elements have helped this a little bit. So I do think this is getting better in time, just very slowly, and I think we are still not fully utilizing kind of the range of difficulty that is the most fun in the game, where you do have a more widespread loadout. And I don't think it's realistic to have all champion mods on at all times for all weapons, nor do I think it's realistic to be like, champions suck, we're getting rid of champions. I think we are well past that point at this point. But I would like to see more moves in the direction, like more seasonal mods that encompass more than just like, okay, here's one special weapon you can use for one champion, and here's one heavy weapon you can use for one champion. That I would like to see be more diverse. I would like to see more exotics roped into having intrinsic anti-champion abilities past what we have already. I think that was a very good change, and I'm sad to see it stopping. And then the GLASSWAY needs less champions. It's too many champions. I don't care what anyone says. Too many champions. Anyway, that is all I've got on champions for the moment. We will see what, if anything, changes next season, but my guess is not very much. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.